Hello, and welcome to the My Father Said podcast, where we discuss all things faith, finance, and family. I am one of your hosts, Ryan. I am both a father and a son.
And I am Robert. I am Ryan's father, and I myself am a son as well. Ryan, I am excited about today's podcast. We have some information and a wonderful guest today that's going to share all types of insight and wisdom on the topic that we've got. You know, we have clients who come in to see us, and they are always wanting to plan towards moving toward their stated goal. One of those goals is retirement.
Golden years.
Yeah, accumulating their assets to get towards retirement. And from the outside looking in, you would think that that's a simple process. Just let me accumulate money, let me put together a nest egg, let's build it up, and I'm going to have a pile of money when I get ready to retire. And then they think about, you know what, I've reached my last day. I'm going to go to work on Friday. I'm going to get the golden watch. They're going to give me a party. I'm going to leave. And then Monday morning, I'm going to get up and do nothing because I'm officially retired. Well, what we have discovered from working with clients is it's not necessarily that simple, because many individuals who are approaching this point in life may have prepared financially, but they haven't prepared mentally. Today we have with us Steve Cloud. Steve Cloud is the president for Vision Ventures, which is a nonprofit organization which focuses on coaching, consulting, and leadership development. Steve comes with us with degrees from Mississippi College, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and Columbia International University. Steve has also served as senior pastor as Northside Baptist Church for 20 years. Steve would be, I think, what we would call a life coach, maybe. And I say that because I share this with our listeners out in Everland. You may notice that as you age, you have that color hair. Then you get to where I've got this color hair, and then you get to where you have that color hair.
No hair.
Exactly. So I am where Steve once was, but I say this in all infection because Steve is a coach of mine. Steve is someone who has been working with me for a few years now and has helped me tremendously as I have been preparing for my transition. And so we thought it would be great for our listeners today to actually hear from someone whose specialty is helping people make that transition from one stage of life to the next stage of life, especially when it comes to something as major as your last 40 or 50 years, all you've done is work, and now we got to relax, and we don't even know how to do that anymore. So let's open it up with some questions for Steve. And Steve, you share with us, if you would, your insight, the things that you think our listeners need to hear. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, I've done my best to raise him. There is no telling what he's going to say.
I have noticed that.
There's no telling. In the warm-up, oh my gosh, it was terrible. But hey, there's no telling. So Ryan, take us away.
Yeah. So I've heard you mention transitions a handful of times, and that's what you do. You help individuals with transitions. Help us understand why exactly transitions matter in the first place.
Okay. Yeah. Great question. Nobody in our world today needs encouragement to believe that the world is changing. I mean, every part of your life is being impacted. If you were trying to explain to your great-grandparents what's going on today, it would be a stretch, would it not?
Yeah.
And so it's not just that the world is changing, but we're changing. I'm aware that somebody recently had another child, and that's a change, is it not?
Sir.
How you been sleeping?
Better than expected, I'll tell you that. Better than expected.
Maybe I ought to ask your wife, but life is full of changes, and but the fact that your circumstances change and your seasons change does not mean you transition well. It was William Bridges wrote the book titled Transition, first copy in 1970. Came back about 30 years later and did an upgrade on it. But it was insightful that he drew the distinction between change and transition. suggesting change is a little bit more external, circumstantial. It's what's happening outside. Change is inevitable, but healthy transition is intentional. And so what you discover is that it's how I'm thinking. It has to do more with my psychology. It has to do something with understanding my identity. And so your question is a great question. Why is it so important? And partly it is because when you stop and think about what you're feeling and thinking, the emotions you have when you're stuck in a change period, what are some of those emotions that come to your mind?
Frustration.
Anxiety.
Yeah. The element of stress.
Yeah.
Confusion. I don't know what to do. At some point, I get discouraged. I get disillusioned. It starts building. And the reality is your ability to transition in a healthy manner radically impacts your physical well-being. It impacts your emotional state. It impacts you relationally. It impacts you spiritually. And so the whole dynamic of learning how to process intentionally the external changes till they become, I'm free within my heart and spirit to pursue what I perceive to be the better life, is enormously impactful for us.
Do you think people realize when they've gone through a change and they have not transitioned healthfully? Do you think they notice that, or is that something kind of foreign? Is that something that you help them discern?
It's a good question. Some of all the above.
Okay.
If you do not have a vision for something better, if you have no level of expectation of what it could be or should be, if the environment that you have been in, people are just, this is the way life is, then that element of invigorating hope is missing. And so the element of suggesting to people, even in the work you guys are doing, that there is a way to have a clear path. There is a way to be able to have answers to what is next. What are my options and how do I proceed?
Some might call that a plan.
They may. Yeah.
That's pretty good. So, Steve, what are some of the key transitions in life that people need to identify, recognize, and face?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's been interesting to me in trying to study this subject is you can go back 4,000 years, like in Eastern thought, Hindu thought. And they basically had divided into 4 sections of life. The area of youth, and most of these were like in 25-year segments. So it was the area of youth. The second was an area of householder, I believe is their title. And it is that period from 25 to 50. This is the interesting period for life. And so that you are building your career, you're determining your values. This is where we have typically become really attached and sometimes addicted to our making of money, our position, our prestige, what the philosophers have then come back to talk about in this series of study and liberation, that this can be a period where our idols begin to really dominate our life. And so we become anchored into this is my identity and who I am. And then for different people around 50, there turns some metaphysical type questions of my whys and what's really satisfying. And I've spent all my life climbing this ladder. Am I on the right wall? And so it becomes a time where, and they call this period the forest dweller. This was a season of life where you begin to try to make things fit together and what matters to you. And it becomes a time where people think more about what matters in life and eternity, and is this all there is, and so on. And then the last is the age of wisdom, where somewhere around 75 till the end of life, there's this, from their standpoint, would be living in an element of enlightenment. And what I discovered is the early literature really kind of put this, even in the Western world, much predictable linear cycles. The more contemporary writings today add a lot of key seasons, like when you move from youth, adolescence, to young adult, college, moving out, early job, getting married, having kids, midlife crisis. Gail Sheely wrote the book in 1970 called Passages. It sold a gazillion copies, and she introduced the term midlife crisis. And so when you start thinking about these, all of those changes call for some element of transition. I mean, do you know any kids that are adults that got stuck in adolescence?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a kind of a funny thing. I couldn't possibly be a senior adult. I'm still dealing with my adolescence.
Absolutely.
So,
did you ride your motorcycle here today?
well, I didn't, but I tried to ride it yesterday. Yeah. So, anyway, those are some of the key seasons. And you know, when do you see people having some of their greatest challenges moving from this season to this season? What stands out when you think back over your life and people you've known?
Well, I remember just one in particular. Whenever several years ago, I had a client, or she's still a client to this day, who was approaching retirement, and she had done everything correct on the left side of retirement. She had accumulated, she had stayed faithful to the strategy, and as she approached 65, she was in a position, on paper, numerically speaking, to absolutely 100% without any doubt accomplish her goal of retiring. Mentally, she was petrified.
Yeah.
If there's a word I can create that would be more descriptive than petrified, I would use it. She mentally was not able to make that decision. We literally had to take her by the hand and walk her across the bridge from working years to retirement years. Mm-hmm. Now, today she's doing great, but I seen very early on that she wasn't mentally prepared. And for the first time in my life, I recognized that there's more to this than just counting numbers.
Yep.
There's more to it. So that's the one that sticks out in my mind.
Yep. Yeah.
That's good. That brings up a good point. This client you're referring to, she spent her whole life working, going through these different changes, maybe having some healthy transitions, and then she gets to the retirement age and she can't make the transition. Why is it that you find it is so hard for individuals to make healthy transitions? Why is that a challenge?
Yeah. Well, I don't have just to think for other people. I mean, you know, I've gone through several seasons right now, and to where I am today. So some of those same challenges have led me into this study, which is part of why I've really kept digging deeper. And so, what's the guy's name? Arthur Brooks. He's a prophet, Harvard right now, such an eclectic past. He was a professional musician. His dad was a PhD. He went back and got a PhD. He became a think tank leader in Washington, D.C., blending the academic elite with the political responsible to look at global issues, and did it for 12 years before he started teaching at Harvard Business. And he's written this book. It's an outstanding book called Strength to Strength. Some of it is biographical, so he's talking about his own journey. And he didn't use this phrase, but you've heard the phrase that what got you here won't get you there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he calls it the stress curse. And so, or no, the striver's curse is what he calls it. So what it is that the things you were rewarded for to get to where you are right now, you had drive, you had ambition, you were focused, you were goal-oriented, you were accomplishment-oriented, all these things.
And now you're none of those.
Well, those don't necessarily serve you well in the next season.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there's a sense of part of what was happening that when I mentioned that during this career period, 25 to 50 years old, and there's no hard lines on that. It may be a 55 or 65 for some people, but you're making these shifts. And Bridges says at the beginning of every transition, there's a death. So why is it hard? Well, change is hard. Change is disruptive. You're turning loose of something that had been your whole value system. You're willing to rearrange and looking at what am I going to do with my future. And so there's a period of uncertainty going through, and there's a willingness to turn loose. And so there's a lot to do with my identity, who I am, what brought me praise in the past, what was my sense of accomplishment. And if I'm walking from that and I don't have something that I'm walking towards, I'm in trouble. That's why the whole concept of at every season of life having a clear vision of moving towards is so valuable. One of the ways that you define coaching, the process of coaching is moving from where I am to where I'd really like to be. And from a Christian standpoint, it would be what I believe would be more of God's best, what I'm pursuing in that part of my life. So that element of getting clarity on that is part of why it's very hard. I need something that has value to me to be willing to turn loose of yesterday. And the cost of it is if you can't turn loose, you're getting a double dose of disappointment. If I'm still locked in on yesterday's dreams, yesterday's over. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have something else that I'm looking forward to, there's nothing that's fueling my soul.
Wow. So for some of our listeners out there, a very practical, if I'm hearing you correctly, a very practical step as we try to make healthy transitions could be have a goal for each stage of your life, for those four. Maybe you formulate it over the years when you're 25 to 50, you're working towards a goal, but in the back of your mind, you're already contemplating a goal from 50 to 75, something healthy to pour ourselves into. Am I kind of picking up on that?
Well, I think there's some foundational issues of knowing who I am and what I value. I certainly am very positive towards looking towards clarity of where I'm seeking to go. It's pretty hard for that adolescent to think about where I am in life. Mm-hmm. And so to have clarity too far down the road, but it is still foundational in those early years. I mean, whether it's financial planning or just living your best life, it's never too early to start. And as long as you're still living, there's hope to keep moving in the right direction.
There you go.
That's good. So Ryan asked a question about challenges to making healthy transitions. What would you say are the keys? And I think you touched on it just a little bit in your last statement, but what are some of the keys to making healthy transitions? Is there a path or a process that's laid out that any individual or all individuals can follow?
I think there are some healthy principles, and different personalities would apply them in different ways. Again, some of the earlier materials on this subject made it a little bit more rigid and concrete, that first this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and that's not what I've seen in life. Life happens, and sometimes it's real messy and it's out of order, and so having some of those foundational principles can be very helpful. But in general, starting off with to be aware.
Be aware.
Yeah, okay. Be aware. Where am I? What is going on? Miles Stanford made the statement, "Only he who knows grows." You know, the Greeks are famous, know thyself. And yet that's one of our great struggles in life. You know, where am I strong? Where am I not so strong? What am I honestly feeling? What is troubling me? What's creating anxiety within me? Simply being aware to create that foundation. And that comes back a little bit to what you were suggesting of the different seasons. I do think that it is profoundly helpful to take time, write it down. If you journal, or just take out a sheet of paper and where am I right now? What am I feeling good about? What am I not feeling good about? Where am I stressed? What am I struggling with? What am I unsure of? What troubles me? What keeps me awake at night? Where am I feeling it? And then a question I love asking people is, what do you want more of right now in this season of your life? What do you want less of? It's a great transitional. What am I hungry for? You know, what would really inspire me and cause me to feel alive on the inside? And so starting off with that honest, correct evaluations, sometimes it requires getting some input from others. I mean, you can ask a spouse, you can ask people you work with, what are you feeling from me, seeing from me? What signals am I giving off? What do you think is causing some real issues for me right now? So principle one, whether you're 25 or 65, be honest with yourself. Be aware of where you are and what you're dealing with right now. And I'm sure you could see applications for something like that in terms of just even in financial planning. You got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. It's interesting hearing you speak. And as I mentioned to our listeners earlier, you are a coach for me. And the refreshment of hearing you put forth some of the questions that we should be asking ourselves as you were speaking, it's as if I was hearing them again for the very first time. So it's something that I think, if I understand you correctly, this is something that we don't visit once and we're done.
No.
We constantly revisit it.
Yeah.
And always keep it fresh and at the top of our mind.
Yeah, we're at the end of the year, and so a lot of people do annual evaluations, or I have done that in a very structured way. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you.
It does not.
Yeah, probably for the last 30 years. And so I do my key areas of life, and I try to be as honest as I can be about those. But I also would like to come back to your goal question. I try to be pretty clear what would be God's best for me in this part of my life, in this season of life. And so I have been working on that right now. But that awareness is something that is, it's regular. You do it in your business. A guy who leads blind goes to the ditch. And the same thing happens in our own lives. So the first principle is awareness. Another one is the word align. You think in terms of the power of alignment. Again, personal life, business, but the busyness of life can get us out of alignment.
Yeah.
We can get pulled this way and pulled that way. So alignment comes back a good bit to what really matters most to me. Stephen Covey is famous for principle-centered leadership. And so he would talk about what's in the hub, what's the center part. You've referred to Bob Buford's book, Halftime. Bob Buford was this extremely successful TV exec, owned a number of stations. In his late 30s, he and his wife brought in somebody to help them in this whole process of how do we move forward in our life, because he was feeling pulled in this direction, pulled in this direction. And the guy that he brought in was not a Christian, was not a believer. But he asked him a key question. He said, Bob, there's a box in the center of your life, and there's one line in the box. There's only room for one thing. What's the most important thing in your life? And, what Buford's feeling like, well, this is really important to me, and this is important to me, and this is important to me. And so it's kind of a hub issue. And this is where, again, coming back to those questions about my why. What do I value most? What do I want most? One of the things that helped me 20-something years ago in some coach training experience, I remember an exercise I was challenged, my wife and I did together. And so it's been proposed, it was proposed by Covey and a variety of people, but look forward next to your end of your life. Look at it in a perspective and look back. So the exercise is you visualize yourself at your own funeral, and what would you like for people to be able to say? What would I want my children to be able to say authentically?
He's still breathing.
Yeah, he's coming back. He's getting up. I want him to say that. Oh, thank God he's still here.
That would be interesting. Yeah. But it was something that we took as a couple about 3 days on. And so it was really a serious thing for us to probe into. We're at this season of our life. We're young and healthy and excited and looking forward to the next season. But what is most important? And this element of alignment is part of what sheds light to say, okay, it makes no sense for me when I'm thinking of my stresses and strains to be pulled by things that I don't think are ultimately important and neglect the things that have the highest value. Okay? So even putting together a financial plan.
We do that.
Yeah, got a variety of stuff. And you could do this, you could do this, you could do that. But how important is alignment?
Stick to the plan. Yep.
Yeah. So, you're thinking about, again, a young guy going into business or somebody at midlife or somebody getting ready for retirement or somebody in the middle of retirement. These principles matter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The third one that stands out to me is the word acknowledge. And this is once I see where I am and where I'd really have a desire to go. I understand what's a guiding principle, what is most important to my life. Then I think I'm ready to make some decisions. But getting through a transition, making progress implies action.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of people get stuck. They keep circling the plane and don't ever land the thing. Mm-hmm. And so identifying what I need to do, and I'm acknowledging, I'm saying no to the old, and I'm choosing to move towards the new. Again, it comes back to what Bridges was saying, that every transition begins with a death. Mm-hmm. And so there is a concreteness of processing, this is who I was, this is who I am. This is where I was, this is where I am going. And when I acknowledge this in the form of commitment, decision, it's really helpful to add those practical action steps, okay? Based on that, here's some concrete things I can do and I will do to move forward. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some applications you think of that with people you work with?
Yeah. Where do you want to go? What does your retirement look like? That's great. It's not just going to happen. We got to lay out steps. So that's one thing. What about you?
I was just thinking, we always speak with our clients when they come in, and we ask them, tell me what your retirement looks like in your mind. And what we find more often than not is they have no idea. And so we say to them, all right, well, we got to create a picture. If you were going to paint a picture of what it looks like, just paint that picture. Now, that won't be your final picture. As you go, you can change colors. You can change shapes. Heck, you can tear up the canvas and start over again. But we've got to be on a direction going towards something that is going to resemble and materialize into what you want it to be as you go. So yeah, the steps are necessary, but you got to begin. And it's funny how you said, you got to start, or you got to acknowledge death at the end of your accumulation years. That's kind of like the death of the accumulation.
Yeah.
Because now we're going
a shift.
We're going from the accumulation life to the afterlife, and living that out. We want to make sure we land in the right spot.
Yeah. And there is so much help available. I mean, you could just go to the internet. How do you prepare for retirement? You can, there's podcasts, there's TED Talks, there's books, there's all kinds of concrete resources, but the vagueness of generalities is just powerless in our life. The clarity of vision and the specificity to what steps will I take now is where the progress begins. So I would say to anybody listening, take a few moments. Where am I? What are the next action steps I need to take? And so that's that acknowledgement. Okay, I see where I am. I make a commitment. I'm deciding to move forward.
So in the realm of finance, let me make sure I understood this correctly. You were saying that there's a lot of information out there, but it's all very general. It's very vague. So our listeners should all come see the Templeton Group because we can be very specific to them. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah. That could be a very concrete and specific step. Yeah, yeah. But it's a commitment to move forward. There's another one that is that I'm hearing from a variety of places. I use the word affirm, and who was it? James Clear wrote the book Atomic Habits. Sold a gazillion copies, still is. It's a bestseller. But he says this begins by focusing on the who, not the what. And so you're clarifying some area of your life you want to change. It's the way I'm thinking, the way I'm responding, the way I'm acting, what I'm doing. It's patterns that I have in my life, and I want to change those patterns. And so what he's talking about is what, from a believer, Christian standpoint, is kind of the renewing of the mind. It's coming back to my identity, who I am. He used the example of, I'm going to stop smoking. And somebody asks you, do you want a cigarette? You say, no, I'm trying to quit. Or somebody else says, no, I don't smoke. It's what's in their mind. This is my new identity. I'm dealing with something that is at the very core of who I am. And for some people, have you ever heard anybody say, well, I'm just not much of a planner?
Oh, yeah.
So that's an identity. And so that may have been who I used to be, but that's not who I am now. I am now somebody who's seeking to clarify the vision for the next season of life. I do know what is important and what I want to pursue. I have made a decision to move from where I am to moving forward. And so I am beginning to fill my mind with the thoughts that inspire hope and inspiration. The whole study of approaching the future with hope is such a great study. Viktor Frankl, a name that many people would be familiar with, Man's Search for Meaning, was in a concentration camp, a psychiatrist. He observed people dying throughout that season in the camps in Germany. And then somebody asked him, how did you survive? He said, well, I noticed that people first die on the inside and then they die on the outside. And he said, I never lost hope. And what I would say to people who are in the midst of transition, wherever you are, there are people that hear this that have just had a divorce. There are people that have just lost a job. There are people that don't know where it's going to come from. There would be every kind of transition from the late adolescence to my season of life. And there's got to be something that is a source of hope in your life as you look at the future. And so finding that, and I guess clearly for me, it is a foundation of faith and something that I have that I can stand on, and a confidence of strength and guidance and direction that makes a profound difference for me.
That's pretty incredible. You know, as you were speaking, and obviously I've been around you, so I have picked up on things that I anticipate Steve Cloud to say. And unfortunately, at the start of this podcast, I did not begin counting. But I wonder if our listeners have kept track of the number of influences, books, that is, that Steve referenced along his path. You know, I say that because our crowd, our support system that we have among us is either going to lift us up, or it's going to keep us where we are, or it's going to drag us down.
Yeah.
Our influences, who we allow to speak influence in our life, has a direct correlation to our direction and where we're going to end up at. I can say from working with Steve over the years that your wisdom is deep. I mean, it's extremely deep for more people that I know. And it's incredible. Steve, for the folks like myself who utilize your coaching, your leadership in their lives, because you've made a profound impact on my life as far as helping me get prepared for my transition. How can our audience reach you at Vision Ventures if they would like to speak to you about the potential of how you can make a positive change in their life going forward in whatever the transition might be? How can they reach you?
Yeah. Well, they certainly can email me, steve.visionventure@gmail.com.
That's venture, not ventures.
Ventures. Steve, yeah.
Okay.
Steve.visionventures@gmail.com. And so that would be certainly one of the ways. But there are a lot of resources and help available, and that actually would be the last word, is assist, get help. And it sounds like such a small thing, but you begin what you picked up on, that community. The study that was done 85 years ago at Harvard, back when John F. Kennedy was there, they have continued to do this study, and it is being written about over and over again, because it was a health and wellness study. So when are you it's healthy and happy study. It was your health and happiness. And so they studied all the dynamics to figure out what it was. And so there's been volumes written about it, but the key essence is the friends you have, this community, the support that you mentioned is a key factor. So if you're in a transition right now, and you're thinking about moving into retirement, the friends that you have, the inspiration you have, you're finding this community is key. But also having somebody who can be a coach or a mentor, or somebody who can help guide that process of moving from where you are to where you really want to be or believe God wants you to be, that's vital.
That is great. That is great. Well, this has been a phenomenal program today. I do hope our listeners will take into account what's been said, come back and listen to it again and again and again. And as much as I love you, as much as I respect you, as much as I look up to you, unfortunately, Ryan has a question for you. And
Oh, okay.
and there's no telling what's going to happen.
It's an easy question. It's an easy question. What is the single best piece of advice you ever got from your father?
It's a great question. You'd have to know the background of my dad to fully appreciate it, but he would say to me, live with eternity in mind. And he had this little phrase that he had got picked up somewhere. It was, life is short and will soon be past, and only the things that are done for Christ will last. Well, I went through a season as a kid pushing back on the rules in life and the questions. But there was a point in college where I began to look at it and I said, if I really do believe that God is real and Jesus is his son, it's a foolish man that will give his whole life to stuff that's going to be done in 100 years from now and miss what could be 1,000 years from now.
Amen. Amen. That'll preach. Have you ever pastored a church? I mean, you sound like a preacher.
Yeah. Well, it's something that's hard to get over.
That's pretty good. That is pretty good. That's pretty good. Take us away, Ryan.
Well, good. Well, guys, thank you all so much for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed the content. We hope you enjoyed listening, hearing from Steve. We certainly enjoy hearing from Steve here at the Templeton Group. So as Steve said earlier, if you want to get in touch with him, we're going to put his contact info into the podcast link, so you'll be able to reach out to him. In the meantime, if you want to learn anything more about the Templeton Group or the My Father Said podcast, feel free to check out our website, our social media, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm Ryan, one of your hosts.
I'm Robert. I'm the other. This is Steve Cloud. Great, phenomenal man of wisdom. Look him up. This is the My Father Said podcast. And we're saying, get out of here.
The opinions voiced in this video are for general information only and are not specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful.